Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Office 365 webinar. Thanks for joining this afternoon. Thanks for your time. As Emma said, we're going to be here for about 45 minutes. So just to cover off Office 365, where we're using it, how BlueLogic deploys it, and to make sure that we've dispelled some of the myths that people seem to have around Office 365. So my name is Tim Hall, Technical Development Manager at BlueLogic. And as I said before, thanks for joining us. So some of the myths that we're going to talk about, we'll talk about a couple now and also as we go through the presentation. One of the myths about Office 365 is it's an all or nothing kind of solution. That isn't the case. It's very much a case of you can take up parts of it, you can license parts of it that you need to move your business. But the idea behind 365 is that it's there to improve collaboration, improve business functionality, and improve the way that you work within your business. One of the things that Microsoft have done to promote or improve 365 uptake in the UK is open 3 data centers. So around the world, there's a number of data centers serving Office 365 to their various regions, and the UK now has 3 of its very own. So some of the original myths around data sovereignty and about data not being able to leave our borders have now been solved. Previously, the data centers were in Dublin and Amsterdam. So for things like the legal sector, this wasn't acceptable because those data centers weren't within EU borders, so UK borders. And that's now been resolved by the opening of those data centers. So what we'll do is we'll press on with the presentation, and hopefully, as you'll see, we'll go through. We've got a number of benefits to talk about to try and see where Office 365 can benefit your business. So this presentation contains sort of slides of our own and also some slides from Microsoft, and also we're going to include a demo of real live Office 365 a bit later on. So it's really about what we're going to do with it. It gives you the tools that you need for today's business. And Microsoft term those under 3 different pillars: worry less, work easier, and work together. And the aim there is to kind of, again, dispelling some myths about security. So the security element is around the worry less, making sure it's 365 is secure. How we secure that, it works exactly the same way as if your data was on site. And we'll talk about that a bit more shortly. Work easier, so using the tools that you're familiar with, so Microsoft Office, to work together, but using those tools with technologies that previously potentially weren't available to your business because of licensing costs. And so forth. So it's enabling enterprise level technology to be available to a business of any size and then licensed on a per user basis. And work together. So this is all about the main thrust of Office 365, which is about collaboration. And we'll touch on this during the demo as well, with things like groups and Planner and Yammer and technologies that we'll kind of touch on shortly, but all about working together and making sure that the teams in your business are working the best way possible. So to expand out on some of those pillars, we've got worry less. So we've got a couple of things there. We've got from a security side, Outlook multi-factor authentication. So that's not only supplying a password, but maybe supplying a PIN number as well. So we can make sure that it is the right person logging onto to the system. New data loss prevention policies. Again, we'll touch on this later on. The data loss prevention is a very hot topic these days. Previously, people have had to buy a separate data loss prevention system to prevent data wrongly leaving the business, but that's included, an example of an enterprise product included in 365. The hello symbol there with the single sign-on, so I'm doing this presentation from a Microsoft Surface, and I can log on to that Surface using my face, so facial recognition, and that's what that depicts. The deferred updates. With 365, for example, you get the latest copy of Office, no matter what the latest version copy of Office is. Currently that's 2016, but you may have other applications that your business relies on that aren't compatible with 2016. So we've got the facility to go back to the previous version, so 2013 in this current case, and that's where we can kind of defer those updates and make sure everyone's working the same, but standardizing in one version across the business. Under the work easier, that's very much around how we're going to collaborate. So starting off top right there, Skype meetings. You're in a Skype meeting right now, so we're able to converse. We can have video in there if we wanted to. I'm not using any other technology apart from Skype, so the sound is all coming through my Surface. And that's aimed at working better, working smarter within your teams across your various office locations, and then extending that out into talking to your customers, doing webinars such as this, or maybe doing sales meetings with customers over Skype rather than having to travel to see those people. Co-authoring. So SharePoint, Office 365 is underpinned in a number of different ways by Microsoft SharePoint. And the SharePoint is what enables the co-authoring element of it. So this is, you may be working on 4 or 5 people on, for example, a new tender. They can work on the same document at the same time, updating their relevant bits, and that will update and refresh on everyone's devices as new data is added and new data is saved. So it's very much a real-time document authoring so rather than emailing that document around 4 or 5 different people and waiting for them to update, then save it and send it on. It's done in real time, and obviously therefore saving people time and effort. Shared notebooks there. So one of my personal favorites, I've been using something called OneNote, Microsoft Office OneNote for a number of years now, and that's a free-form editor. And OneNote comes with the version of Office that you get with Office 365 if you've got a plan that includes Microsoft Office to be downloaded. And those notebooks, when saved again in SharePoint or in a group that you're a member of, are updated and shared across your team, and therefore real-time updating, different people doing different things within that audit. So that notebook. So maybe we've got meeting actions, meeting notes happening in OneNote real time, and that's updating on everyone's devices. So rather than 4 people sat there with four laptops and a notebook each, they just sat there with their 4 laptops and everything's getting updated. And again, there's no need for creating Word documents and sending those around afterwards. Under the work together, that's obviously we're talking about there. It's the same copy of Office across any device it might use, which we'll touch on a bit later on. And then documents that are always there and things we can do to sync those to devices and make sure that the data you have is always with you and you're always communicating with your colleagues. Just going back to the sort of compliance and the security element of this. One of the myths about 365 is, well, I put my data in the cloud, I don't have control of it, what am I going to do with it? Microsoft can view my data, they're going to give access to that data to other people. It simply isn't the case. Every Office 365 tenant is its own security boundary, therefore you still control the data, you still control who has access to it. We have to authorize, if you've got a support query, we have to authorize Microsoft to be allowed to look into your portal to do that support. So again, it's no different to having your data on a server in the corner of your office or in a server room. Those security boundaries still exist, and we can maintain compliance no matter what the type of business is that you do. And again, that's across any device that you're using, not just Windows devices. So touching on the way we want to. So again, it's the same interface across any device. We're talking about consistent interfaces, the same sort of Windows 10 tiles, the way of accessing things. Again, we'll demonstrate this during the demo in a second. Each of the users gets a terabyte of online storage. So again, we're not talking about having to fit on-premise service with loads and loads of disk space that we may or may not use. We've got that disk space available to us in the cloud to use. If we're not, it's there, it's great. But again, we can collaborate and we can edit documents in real time, and we can take those with us, which I'll talk a bit more about very shortly. Just touching on the collaboration, we talked about Skype, we talked about OneNote meetings. A lot of Office 365 is backed up or underpinned by SharePoint, but it's the SharePoint full version, if you like, so SharePoint server. So SharePoint as a product for installing on your own servers has been a free or a paid for product for many years. What 365 gives you is the full-blown SharePoint server in the cloud. So it really is about enterprise level products delivered to you on a per user basis, licensed per user, to give you the functionality that you need to bring your teams together, to help them work smarter, and to bring the office together to work better. So that the SharePoint in the background allows you to simultaneously edit the same document. So you may be working on a tender, people updating different parts of that. Because it's shared in from SharePoint, they can do that, and it means people aren't emailing documents around and having to rely on email or wait times to get things done. They can work on it simultaneously. Just touching on what they call cross-platform experiences. What that means for us is the experience of using these applications. So again, it's the Office Suite, so OneNote, Word, Excel, and so forth. But it's the same no matter what device. So I'm talking to you now from a Windows Surface device, but equally I could be using a Mac or an iPad or an iPhone. For example, if someone calls me and makes a Skype call to me, it rings simultaneously on my iPhone. So I could actually answer that internal Skype call using my mobile phone. So really, it's kind of as many ways as possible to operate exactly the same way, no matter what the device we're talking about. And as I've mentioned a couple of times here, it is still very familiar. One of the myths about 365 is you have to do everything in a web page. It's not true. You can do that. There are web apps for all the things that you see in front of you. And again, I'll demonstrate that shortly. But it integrates seamlessly with the copy of Office, which is why when Blue Logic, we talk about 365 one-to-one with customers, we're always talking about plans with 365 that include a copy of Office, because it answers that standardization across the business to make sure everyone's got the same version of Office. But we know with that sort of on-device copy of Office, you can work better and you stay connected to your information better. One thing to note, that those plans that do include a copy of Office, it includes 5 copies of Office per user. So for example, you might have a tablet, or you might have a desktop PC and a laptop for some reason. All those devices are all licensed from one user. You might have a Mac. Again, Office for Mac is licensed on a per user basis. So as a user of Microsoft Office, I could also install it on a Mac if I had one. So it really is just one license, but covering multiple devices. So again, answering some of those licensing costs or licensing issues that you may have had in the past. So it's not just about Office. There's other tools that we've talked about. So we've mentioned Skype for Business. OneDrive for Business is your personal sync of documents in and out of SharePoint. So SharePoint, again, is one of the kind of fundamentals to how Office 365 works. That's where we're going to store data. That's where it's kind of our new age file store, if you will. But the sync there allows me to take that data with me. So I'm syncing it down to my device. For example, I've got OneNote on my iPhone. I might be on the train making some notes into that. It then uses OneDrive to sync that up into Office 365. So it's available and secure and safe, such I lose that device. Yammer is something else that we'll talk about during the demo. Yammer is essentially interactive social media collaboration and comments. It's, I suppose, in a kind of Facebook type style, but in a secure business environment, which is enclosed to you. It's not for outside input. It's a closed forum for communicating in different ways across the business. So as I said before, we're using the Skype for Business call now. So we're talking about audio and video calls, online meetings and sharing. So I'm sharing a presentation to you from within that application. And what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to just talk about a couple of things, but in a real live environment to show you a full demonstration. So first thing we'll talk about is groups and collaborating effectively those. Then we're going to talk about SharePoint Online, and then we'll talk about Planner, and we'll talk about Yammer. But I'll skip through those slides, but we're going to come back to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to my desktop. I'll just wait for that to connect to make sure you can see me. Okay, just waiting for it to say updates for everybody. Good. Okay, just while I wait to make sure everyone can see that. Just so if you're wondering, MOD isn't the MOD. This is not a secure government portal. This is Microsoft Office demo portal. So what we've got here is we've got a full-featured demo portal that we can use in environments like this to give you an idea of what Office 365 is. And again, obviously we'll follow this up with calls. So if we want a sort of more personal demonstration about how it could boost productivity and collaboration in your business, then we can go through the same portal and do a demonstration and talk about specific cases with you all. So if I was to log on straight to sort of straightforward Office 365, this is what I would see. There's my applications for this particular portal. As you can see, some of the things that we've talked about there are presented as an object to go in. Bearing in mind this is a full demo portal, so it's got some additional features in there. But you can see straight away some of the things that come out. We can do web apps, we can talk about Word, we can talk about Excel, and then some other items which I'll cover better on. But the security and the compliance, so that kind of what am I doing with my data is there. It's key. It's right at the forefront of being able to manage that. So, for example, let's take a situation here. I'm a user. I'm dealing with my day-to-day basis, and I have a role, but that role touches on a number of different departments. I've got maybe some cross-department forums or teams that I'm a member of to deliver certain things within my business. So if I go into the Mail app, which I've already got open at the top here, this user, I would see my email down this side. So I've got some information here about I've been assigned some tasks. But what I can see on the left-hand side is some groups. And these groups are where we're doing cross-department or inter-department tasks. And what we've done, we've grouped those together. Maybe it's a project, maybe it's a new customer coming on board, maybe it is that new tender that we need to get on board to promote the business or move the business forward. And the groups are there to bring that information and that collaboration together into one point. So, for example, if I go into my product launch group, so we're talking about moving this forward. And what we've got straight away is we've got some information about that product launch. And a 365 group basically is, as I said before, it's a way of bringing that information together for a particular reason. So when you do that in 365, it creates an email address specific to that group. So a product launch at customer.com. And what that does, that means when you have any communication regarding that project, you include the group email address, and therefore the email trail, the informational attachments regarding that group go into in this case, the product launch shared group. So I've got my conversations here. So this might be a Skype for Business conversation, or it might be an email conversation about different things that are coming up. I've got various information about calendars or items that are happening. I've then got files. So these are the files that we may have created and shared amongst the group. So this could, so here we've got an elevator pitch and some value propositions and a web launch brief. So these are the items that we've shared. So this is a SharePoint site that's specific to that group of people. A group can be a public group, so it could be shared with all of the business. So public in that sense is the entire business because we're happy that people can see that. Or it might actually be, a director's special project. We've got a closed group of people. Only those group of people have access to it, have permissions to it. So we've locked down that to a certain group of people. Any communication that happens between those guys, the data is stored in a closed group and therefore can't be accessed by anybody else. Going back to that group again, we've got a calendar. So again, we're talking about things that are happening. We can put calendar groups in here. As you can see, for this user I'm logged onto, I've got my own calendar, which is in the blue, and I've got my product launch calendar. So if I was a member of multiple groups, I've got an idea of how my time's being divvied up there. So I can see that I've got a market segment performance 10 to 30 call every Thursday to talk about the product launch and some various other bits and pieces. So they would overlay in their calendars to bring that information together. Ideally, boosting productivity, boosting collaboration, making sure people don't clash. I've also got my notebook. So again, I've talked about shared notebooks a couple of times. That would either within the interface give you OneNote within the web app, or I can link that to my OneNote that's part of Office on my devices. So again, I can have that on my mobile device, so I can be updating my OneNote on my iPhone while I'm on the train, and that will sync back, and the other guys in the office can see that. We've also got Planner. Planner is an interesting point. Before I show you Planner, it's interesting to note that 2 months ago Planner didn't exist, but those customers are on the plans where Planner has been implemented. They didn't ask for Planner. It was an additional feature that was added by Microsoft, and they then basically received that updated feature for free. So one of the benefits of getting to 365, because you've got enterprise class productivity tools, they're not standing still. Microsoft are developing those. It's not to say that it's a kind of it's all going to break because of the bleeding edge of technology, but they're adding features and functionality that the users want, and they're adding those to the plans with no extra cost to the user. Their plans stay the same. They've now got access to Planner within their Microsoft their 365 portal. So if I head up to Planner, I've got that open already. So my Planner is really it's time management, it's project management, it's calendaring and team tasking, all brought together by the various different elements of 365. So again, I can see there we've got our product launch, we've got 8 tasks left to do, and we've got 43 days left to do that. Some of those are late and some of those in progress. So let's have a quick dive in to see what's going on. And by default, we're presented with a board. The board is split up into messages and branding, so it's silos of events that need to happen for my product launch. I've got the messaging, branding, launch events, the social media around that, and then a sort of a straightforward to-do list. Each of those is allocated to a person, and as you can see at the top here, these are the members of my group that are operating within that SharePoint group and within that product launch team of people. And each of these is a task. We can then allocate that to a person, give them the task, give them a deadline to do that, and start to kind of divvy up the work, and obviously essentially project management. I've got a couple of views that I can do here. So if I flip over to the chart view, which is great. So it's always a bit of a worry doing a technical demo and making sure it works. So we're all good so far. So I can see here that I've got a couple of unassigned tasks. I can see that Alan here, he's done some tasks, or he's got one task in progress, but he's also got a task that's late. If I click on the task that's late, it changes my view on the right hand side here to show what tasks are late. So I've got the one there, the Facebook campaign is overdue. And if necessary, I can then go into that task, reassign it to maybe Ben down here because he hasn't got a task at the moment to do with product launch, and kind of start to manage my time without any additional effort. I can see it in one setting. And then I can go back to my hub. I can look at the other plans that I'm a member of, or other groups that I'm a member of, and start to kind of get their time together and pull them together so that we're kind of using that team effectively. So what we talked about there, just kind of recap that we've been through mail, which is kind of where a lot of people start with 365. We've gone from mail into groups. Groups is the sharing of information across product teams or across business teams. We've had a look at the calendar. We've talked about the notes and the SharePoint site that's to do with that. If we just touch on SharePoint itself, find the right tab, bear with me a second, apologies. So what we've got here is I've actually flipped over to the full SharePoint site. So we've got groups associated with SharePoint, but I'm actually in sales and marketing here, and we've got a presentation going on, and I've got my documents that are associated with me, and I've also got various different statuses. This is a sort of a full-featured and I must stress very well set up and customized SharePoint site, but it means it's that kind of full intranet homepage. Where am I sharing data? Who am I giving it to? What am I doing with people's information and getting that out to the company? So this is the homepage for the company called Contoso. We've got various type of marketing information. We've got some articles that people have posted to do with various elements of the business. We've got a Yammer feed here, which isn't logged in at the moment, which I'll come on to in a second. And we've got videos, so we can store videos in 365. We can see that this happy chap here is the employee of the month, so we recognise him on the homepage of our intranet. And down here I've got some personalised metrics of information and documents that are personal or tailored to the person who's logged on and looking at this. So as you can see, that doesn't look like a kind of a basic SharePoint site. It's a full-featured site that's then divvied up amongst people and employees, and I've got my data split down by department or employee. So we're bringing together HR information with team information and resources to bring that, again, aimed around collaboration. So the other thing we were just going to mention regarding collaboration was Yammer. So if I go back to my homepage here, and I'm going to go into the Yammer app, which is great. So it's going to bring up my Yammer feed. And as I said before, Yammer is a social interaction within the business, so secured down, so you give people access to it in your business, and they can comment. So in the past, what we might do is we might send an email out to the entire business. That email might hit sort of 30, 40, 50, 60 people, and then if someone replies, that that reply might then reply all to that 60 people. It becomes very cumbersome to understand who's replying and doing what. So obviously it's very much kind of social media and very current, very kind of Generation Y, if you like, way of interacting. And we in Blue Logic are using it right now. So for example, we had our own Great British Blue Bake Off on Monday. So very much organised by the social committee, but we're getting people involved. We're getting people to look at the cakes that the people have made. Yes, there was some official tasting, but just those guys who couldn't make it to the office, let's have a visual kind of poll as to who they thought the best cake or the best visual cake was, and kind of having comments and likes and replies and shares and announcements in there. It kind of brings people together from a kind of social point of view, to kind of aid another way of not just kind of relying on email to do that, but doing it in a kind of modern and up-to-date way. As you can see on the left-hand side there, we've got something called external groups that are also available. So one of the other things that we're doing with our own Yammer site is using this of a way of bringing together comment and discussion forums for certain segments of our customer base. So and we're using that to kind of interact with those guys, share documents with them, but also get them to comment and have a discussion without having to be on a phone call or so forth. Again, it's very much in a very current sort of social media way, but it's again avoiding email, kind of making it a bit more interactive, and everyone can see what the comments are going on. So yeah, so that's Yammer, and the other thing we can do is by default there's an all company there, so we can give that to that's the kind of default feed for everyone to see, but we can divvy that down into groups, so we can have a sales team, we can have a technical team, we can have a marketing team. So those guys have got their own interactive forum, no matter where they are. And again, this extends out into mobile devices. So I tend to use Yammer a lot from my iPhone. Take a picture, post something that's kind of relevant to the people might want to know about new products, or if I'm in a seminar being delivered by a vendor, I can take a picture, and that can be, I can update my colleagues in an interactive way, sort of real time about new things that are going on. So a very great way of communicating in the modern world. So just to sort of head back to our presentation, hopefully that was interesting, and that gave you an idea of what we're talking about. Just bear with me a second while I just go back to my presentation. Good. So technology works, which is great. Always good in a technical demo. So we've been through a few things, and hopefully that's given you a flavour of the reason why Office 365 is not just about kind of moving your data to the cloud. The idea is to kind of, this is a great opportunity to look again at how the business works together, look again at how teams work together, and look again at how you may have over time built up a number of different systems for collaboration or for document sharing or for working together. And this is the idea behind 365, is to bring all those together in one place using tools that you're already familiar with. So there's a couple of things that I haven't mentioned so far, and these are kind of add-ons. So that obviously, as with any kind of a thing in life, you might buy a Ford car, but then you might add some options to it. Some of these are options that come along with certain packages. Some are included. So just to kind of give you an idea of what they are. So Delve is, if you like, that's kind of modern searching across your data. So I can, for example, I could search for all documents to do with Q4, and that would go across all the SharePoint sites and information that I have access to and I have permissions to see, and bring me back any documents that either have Q4 in the text, Q4 in the title, or have anything relevant to Q4 in them, so I can see them in a visual way in 365. Sway is modern, as it says there, create and share interactive reports. So it's a kind of, if you like, PowerPoint on steroids, again delivered through Office 365 with interactive kind of pictures and zoom in, zoom out, that kind of stuff. So it's you could spend hours and hours in Sway. It depends on how long you've got to do reports, but a great product. OneDrive we've already mentioned. Power BI that stands for Power Business Intelligence. The idea there is that a lot of people now are talking about data analytics. I've got a lot of data in my business, but I don't know how to analyze that data and look deep within it to kind of give me the best business insight. The great sort of question or thing there is that that's built into 365. You point it at your data. That might be a database, it might be a spreadsheet, it might be an Access database, and the idea there is to kind of use that. And I suppose like sort of Sway, which is PowerPoint on steroids. Power BI is your kind of Excel pivot table on steroids. That's going to give you an insight across your business data. With it, you can create dashboards, so you can deliver information maybe into the sales team, into the management team about trends, sales, invoicing last week, that kind of thing. As long as you point it at the data, it's very much a kind of point and click manipulation there to kind of give you an insight into the business and create some dashboards to run the business from. Separate conversation, that one, but if you want to have that conversation, then we can do that when we follow up after this call. So just to kind of, it's worthwhile, I think, in this day and age, we talk a lot about security, particularly cyber security, and there's a couple we just want to talk briefly about a couple of things. One is rights management, and as you can see there from the slide, we can add rights management to documents. So yes, the document might be shared in SharePoint, but we're using Excel to access and edit it and add data into it. And then using that, we can then drive security policies across that data. So in this particular example, I'm restricting access to anybody who's in the Microsoft group, and then I can give them one of 4 different levels of access. And it depends on what that is. So again, we can put some rights management, say you can or can't do that with this document. You're a member of a certain group, therefore you're allowed restricted access. Other groups, it might be the kind of hierarchical level, higher up, more access you have. It depends on how you go, but it's all tailored to the business, and it's all built into 365, so that you've got that readily available to you. The other one, which is worth mentioning, which is very relevant today in the data loss in the cybersecurity world, is data loss prevention. A lot of people talk about cybersecurity in the sense of it's people hacking into my servers and stealing my data. But cybercrime is also coming from, it's how do you manage the data that leaves your company legitimately or not legitimately. So, for example, have you got disgruntled employees emailing customer lists out of your business? That might be a spreadsheet. Data loss prevention is aimed at kind of tackling that. So some of the default policies that are sort of out of the box, if you like, in 365 are it will search attachments or emails, or attachments in emails, I should say, for things like credit card numbers, national insurance numbers. So you give it the text to look for, you give it the information that it might be finding, and then it can block that email from going out because it contains sensitive information. So you might have a customer list, and you might have a number of those customers that you can identify that would always be on that list. So we put those in the email and make sure that they're not getting sent out or emailed to an external account, a Gmail account or something like that. So it's all around kind of tailored around the business. Obviously, it's not to stop business happening, and some of that data legitimately should be sent on email, but it's aimed at avoiding the data that you don't want to lose leaving the business at any time. Okay, so plans and licensing. It's a very much a sort of what is right for your business. At Blue Logic, we start with a particular plan, and then we kind of build around the needs of that customer. And it may well be, again, this kind of comes down to a myths and information basis. So, in short, there are two different types of plans. There's a business essentials plan, which allows you to have up to 300 users in your Office 365 portal, and then there are enterprise plans that have the facility for unlimited users. Those two different types of plans have different features, and within those, either up to 300 or unlimited user plans, there's again sub plans which either have more or less features within them. But the business, if a business has got 40 users, not all 40 users need to be on the same plan. You may have, for example, 25 users who are office based, but then have maybe 25 guys who live in who do deliveries. So therefore, all they need is to receive emails So great, they can have an email only plan, and they can be all part of the same Office 365 tenant. Obviously, the people with the business premium plan, for example, would have more features and be able to do more things in terms of sharing documents. But the point being is, it's not one plan for the entire users. You can mix and match plans across your user environment. Those plans are licensed, as I said, per user. So for things like shared mailboxes, so your info at or your sales at type mailboxes, those aren't included. It's only licensed against real people who use devices. As mentioned before, one user on, say, for example, the business premium plan is allowed to install Office 5 times on 5 different devices. That includes mobile devices, and also they're allowed to install it on Macs. So again, it kind of standardizes your licensing and means you're covered moving forward. So the headache of kind of managing who's got what license, what device it's on, what version it is kind of taken away, because we know that we're paying for licenses on a monthly basis, for example, and everyone's got the same version. It's either the current one or the one previous. So currently Office 365 is deploying Office 2016, but if you've got applications internally that aren't compatible, then you're allowed to install Office 2013. And as new versions of Office come along, you'll then be automatically eligible to use those new versions because you're an Office 365 customer. As I touched on there, it's predominantly now licensed per month. So if, for example, if you've got 25 users now, but you might have seasonal workers that join you during the Christmas period, then you can add licenses for those users over the Christmas period and then take them away again in January when they've finished. So it's really on a kind of consumption model. So very much like you pay for your electricity or your gas, you use what you need, and then if you don't use it, you don't pay for it. That's kind of, it's just much easier to kind of manage that through. Another myth about moving to Office 365 is it's a cumbersome and arduous process. As I touched on previously, a lot of customers that we're seeing start with moving email, so it's time to upgrade their existing server-based mail system that they've got in their office. How do they move to it? So, for example, with email, it's built into 365 that we can sync your mail in the background while the business still works, and then at a predetermined date, once all the emails synced in the background, we can flip you over and point your Outlook to Office 365, point your mail to be delivered to 365. So probably in a sort of a 2 or 3 hour window, one morning, we can move you to 365. All the email you had there previously is there. You're still using Outlook. It still has the same directory of people. It's exactly as it was. You're just now running from the cloud. So the transition tends to start with email, and then we build in other services around that and start building out things like SharePoint groups and Yammer and enabling the Skype for Business and so forth. So the point really is it's a very straightforward and should be a very seamless and easy migration. Couple of things there. I'm not going to go too much into this slide, but one of the things, as I said before, the planner element was added to Office 365 about 2 months ago as an addition to certain plans. It was added to those guys and to no extra cost themselves. Some of the things that we're looking at here, these are about to go live in Office 365, so increase around the security to cover off new threats and the new security requirements. Increased analytics, again, more to do with Power BI. And then one of the things that's going live at the moment is having or being able to have your telephone system in Office 365. So not right for everybody, but it sort of to demonstrate, if you like, the fact that it's not a platform that's standing still. It's something that once you've paid for it, that any new features that are enabled for your plan, you get without any additional cost to yourselves. So again, it's that kind of another myth about, I pay once and I have to pay more in the future. That's not the case. It's kind of once you're paying for that plan, you get anything that's entitled to that plan now or in the future. But again, all of these things we can talk about. It's very much on a kind of individual basis, and we can have a conversation individually with you about your requirements or what you want to see out of a transition to the next stage of computing. So really, to kind of bring the webinar to a close, what are the next steps from our point of view? So as Emma said before, we'll send out a survey to kind of gauge your feedback on the webinars. We're very keen on feedback at BlueLogic because, we try and do our best in these presentations, but, we're always willing to improve, and we're by no means, we want to make sure it's the best and getting the best message out to you guys. Following this, what we'll do is we'll get a call from everybody who's registered. We'll get a call from one of our account managers to go through any requirements you might have, follow up on what you thought about the webinar, and see where we can go now. And one of the things we're doing to kind of assess where people are with their business and whether they're cloud ready is a cloud ready audit. And that's a case of us coming to you, looking at your business, looking at how you work, looking at what you're trying to achieve moving forward, where your business is going, and then going, right, how can that fit into the cloud? What is right for you? Which bits of 365 potentially could enable that for you? What challenges have you got? And then kind of bring those together as a one piece to kind of move you forward as a business. So you'll get a contact from one of our account managers to achieve that, and they'll be in touch in the next couple of days to discuss that further. Oh, just missed slide. So finally, can I just say thank you. Hopefully that was a useful presentation. Thank you for your attendance this afternoon. As I said, we're about 42 minutes now, so that's my timing has been good again today, which is great. Appreciate your time for listening. Like I said this before, hopefully that was useful. And what we'll do is we'll head over some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. So we have one question, which is from Pasha, saying, if a member of staff changes, can we transfer the license to a new user?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. Once the license has been assigned to a user, that license isn't then fixed to them and we can't change it. So in that example I gave you, if someone moved job role and they need a higher level license with more features, no problem. You just go into the portal and we can change that license that's been assigned to that user. Similarly, if you need to keep data when someone's left, we can take the license away, archive the data, and then that license can then be reassigned to a new user. So if you've got sort of a workforce that kind of moves around a lot, if you've got 40 people, you lose one, and then you employ someone next week, then that license can be reassigned to that new person. So no problem there at all.
And then we have one other question from Caleb, which says, if we change system, how easy is it to do a mass data dump?
Okay, yeah, great. Thanks, Caleb. Question there is, I suppose it's, I'm assuming, or maybe if you want to kind of add another comment, is this if you moved away from Office 365 or if you moved away from a current system into Office 365? Okay, right, fine. So to answer this sort of second part first, if you move to another plan within 365, then the data stays the same. It's just the plan. It's if you like, 365 is based around your portal. That portal is then assigned licenses. If you decided actually I start with a basic plan but want to move data or want to transition into a bigger plan, we just add those licenses to your portal and then take away the old ones, and then you get the features. If you moved, if you like downgraded to a different plan and wanted to take data out, then we have to sort of, there are ways of doing it. It's not straightforward, but yes, Microsoft do make that available to do that. So it's relatively straightforward. It just needs a bit of planning. So yeah, it's relatively straightforward. Mike just asked there, if the internet connection goes down, do we come to a standstill? So yeah, I suppose you have to be right. We have to be honest about that. It is reliant on the connection that you're on because your data is in the cloud. One of the things I haven't kind of mentioned there is disaster recovery side of things. So yeah, in the same way as if your internet connection down, you wouldn't receive any, if your mail server is currently on premise, you wouldn't receive any new email, but you would receive internal mail. With 365, if your internet connection was down, you wouldn't receive any new mail, be it internal or external. The difference being is that with 365, you could go down to McDonald's and hook up to the Wi-Fi, and then you'd be back on your email. Whereas if your server's on premise and your internet connection is down for 3 or 4 days, you're then relying on some other kind of failover technology. So I suppose that kind of answers the question. So yeah, it is all in the cloud, so you need to be connected to the cloud to be able to access it. So very fair question. Having said that, I just touched on DR there for a second. We were having conversations with customers because it enables them to kind of move away from single pieces of hardware or virtual machines on a local server. It is in a resilient data center in the UK, so there's an element of disaster recovery available to you by taking up Office 365. Any more questions? I think David there was just typing. I was going to see if his. Yeah, no problem. Go on, Caleb. Oh, wait me a second. Okay. If anyone's just while we're waiting for, I was under the impression that local syncing allowed some work to go on. Okay, yeah. So just to kind of cover off the sync there. So if you utilize the OneDrive where it syncs to your desktop, your data. In the same way as sort of offline files in previous versions of Windows, the data is available on your local device, and therefore so you can continue working in terms of the file data and documents stored in your OneDrive, and then when you get connection again, you can that'll then resync back up to 365. It's things like email and so forth. If you haven't got a connection, obviously you're not going to be connected to that email at that point. Yes, David. So yeah, same answer. Yes, so you can work offline from your local sync of OneDrive to you work on that spreadsheet while on the plane, and then sync up when you get to your destination. I think we've got a question just coming from Pasha as well. So thanks for these questions. Again, if anyone has a question that they think of or thought of after we finish today, no problem. If you email those through to Emma, and then we'll get the answers to those sorted out and then come back to you. And again, obviously, if you've got any questions, we'll be giving you a call to follow up and make sure, see if you've got any more questions from that as well. Okay, so yes, exactly right. So yes, we email invoices from so if Pasha asked a question about emailing invoices from the MIS, would it still connect as present or save in the outbox if there wasn't a connection? So yeah, exactly. So Outlook works exactly the same. So like now, if your email server was unavailable for a short period, once you sent the email, it'll be stored in your outbox, and then when you get connection again, those emails will be then sent on. So yes, absolutely. Still the same. And also, even if you've got things like photocopiers and other devices that sort of send email themselves, that still works. It just you bounce that up to the cloud and to Microsoft, and it then arrives in your inbox, exactly as it does now. So it's really kind of as seamless as possible. It's just working exactly the same way using Outlook. So great. Thanks all again for your time. Thanks for your questions. Great set of questions there. What we'll do is we'll bring that to a close. Thank you for all attending. And then, as I said before, we'll follow that up over the next day or so with a presentation, a questionnaire and a follow-up conversation. So once again, thank you very much.